Hello there, dear friends. This is Raymond Jetson, and I am thrilled to welcome you to the first recording of 2022 under our new branding, My Perspective, where we will create space to have important conversations with people who are just doing amazing things across this country. And I am excited to start it all off with a very dear friend of mine, Paul Irving. Paul, good greetings and welcome.
Great to be with you, as always.
So I am so thankful for you making the time to be with us, and we're going to dive into this whole notion, this whole world of aging, longevity, productivity, the living to be 100, and all of these other really, really important things that, in my opinion, I don't think enough folks are really paying attention to in our country and in our world. And so one of the ways I like to get our conversation started is by asking my guests who are you in 25 words or less? So who is Paul Irving?
He's a guy who's trying to do something good for the world and trying to do things that are interesting and important. Ray, as you know, I was a lawyer for many years, and you and I had the experience of sharing both retirement from our principal professions to a program at Harvard University that was a lot of fun and interesting and an opportunity for change. And then I went to work in the nonprofit world and focused on aging, as you say. What I really wanted to do, as you know, is either play in a rock and roll band or second base for the Dodgers, but neither of those two things panned out.
Neither of those worked out.
So here I am.
There's still hope for us in the rock and roll band.
Right.
So you mentioned ending up in this aging space and doing some really important work there with Milken, the Milken Institute. So tell me about your journey into this world of aging, longevity, and intergenerational relationships.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. In many ways, I fell into it. It was serendipity, and I think one of the lessons that I take from my own experience is the importance of serendipity, the importance of being open to new things and the possibilities that life brings, oftentimes unexpectedly. I had been involved in a whole range of social change issues really throughout my life, in issues around income inequality and immigration policy and social justice, civil rights, and civil liberties. I'd never really thought about aging or older adults, except as it related to my parents and grandparents. And I started this new job at the Milken Institute, initially as president. And very early, right at the beginning of my tenure, our head of development walked into my office and said, one of our foundation supporters is interested in doing a media-friendly, highly visible project around population aging. And I thought about it and realized that I didn't know very much about it, started studying, became fascinated. And really, Ray, as you said in the beginning, with the population change that we've experienced, both due to historically low birth rates and longer lives, that has continued to accelerate, there just is not enough awareness and understanding and conversation about it. I concluded that really, with the possible exception of climate change, that our changing population, our aging population, may be the most important phenomenon that all of us will experience in this century. And so I became really interested in it, and it absorbed me, and it's what I've been doing for the last 12 years.
I was watching a documentary this past weekend, and the person who was being interviewed was pointing out that 1957, 58, 59, and maybe 60 were these huge growth years, and that within the next few years, we know that the baby boomers are this huge group, but this I think their numbers were like 60% of that group is going to be reaching these what were historically magical ages, and its impact on our country is going to be significant.
So it's certainly true of the boomers, and I'm one. I'm just about to turn 70, so I'm kind of in the midst of that pack. But I think the important thing to understand is that this is not just kind of the demographic bulge moving through the snake. This is very much a permanent state. And again, Ray, it's a product both of across the world of historically low birth rates and longer lives that really were a product of, or have been a product over the last 150 years or so of advances in medical science and sanitation and safety. So the population will simply look much older in decades to come. This is, by the way, not just true in America, it's true across the world, in Asia and in Europe, and really with the exception of sub-Saharan Africa and India. The world is getting much older, and if you project out and look at what will happen in Africa and India in decades to come as a result of the advancement of women, reduction in infant mortality rates, longer lives, you'll see very much this same phenomena of population aging. So we have to get used to a demography that has never existed in the course of human history before, remarkably.
Yeah, I was actually reading an article, and I'm regretful that I can't remember the country that was mentioned, but they were actually selling more adult diapers than baby diapers.
Probably Japan, but
Japan.
It's probably Japan, but not just true in Japan these days. It's interesting. There's a lot, as you know, a lot of discussion and oftentimes hyperbole about relations between the United States and China. And interestingly, if you think about one thing, looking for common ground, places that countries can work together, China and the United States share the challenge of population aging. China had its one-child policy for years and years, realized that its demographic picture was changing rapidly and decided to change it to a two-child policy, and now it's a three-child policy, but it really hasn't worked. Yeah. What's happening is young Chinese, just like young Americans, are deciding to have fewer kids because it's hard to raise kids. It's expensive and it's time consuming, as we all know, and it's also incredibly rewarding. But culture in many ways has shifted us toward these very small families, one child or no children. You know that marriage, in many ways, is a shrinking institution, even though both you and I have been married a long time.
Yes.
Again, this is something that really requires adaptation of all institutions across society, and I think we're really just beginning to understand that. We see it in health, but we have to see it in business and education and the design of our communities and the design of our homes and our cultural norms and how our media relate to aging. So everything is changing, and it's a really interesting and very challenging area of focus.
So this notion of change and shifts that have taken place and are taking place, when you look at your time, Paul, in this space, what would you characterize as the most significant shift that you've noticed in this space?
So I think it's probably recognition. I won't say it's necessarily solutions at this point, but certainly recognition. I often joke that when I started working in this, I could have stood on the street corner outside my office with a sandwich board, Ray, saying, "We'll speak for food," and not one person would have stopped and given me the time of day. But and now it's kind of remarkable. I'm getting multiple calls a day, and it's not because I'm the world's most charismatic speaker, and it's not because it's certainly not because of my height or my hair. It's because the subject has just risen to the level of awareness that I think it has in the past. Now, with that said, and by the way, a whole series of things flow from that. The United Nations and World WHO, the World Health Organization, have their decade of healthy aging, which we are in currently. I'm on a National Academy of Medicine commission in the United States that will issue a report very soon on healthy aging, healthy longevity, looking at the future. So there's more and more attention to it. There's more and more understanding of the challenges of the disconnect between lifespan and health span, the time in which we're healthy and the time in which our lives decline, and how we can compress mortality and morbidity, limit that period of time in which we suffer and often suffer in lonely ways before we die. There's a lot of interest in the scientific community about life extension, about the possibility of 100-year lives and 120-year lives and beyond. There's a recognition in business about the possibilities of the longevity economy, the opportunity for products and services and innovations to serve the needs and aspirations of an older population. So a lot's going on that I think literally just a few years ago wasn't, and that's heartening, and it's refreshing, and it's exciting. With that said, we have a long way to go. Ray, you better than me will understand what I'm about to say, but I think one of the great challenges that we continue to suffer from, and by the way, the WHO has identified it as a public health challenge, is ageism, is a belief that somehow older people, because of our loss of hair or our wrinkles, are less. That our wisdom and our experience are not of value, that we deserve to be sidelined and told that we're no longer relevant in society, that we're oftentimes demeaned and joked about in public media. And I often say to people, it takes a long time to change culture, to change recognition of the possibilities and potential of any population. And as you know as well as I, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 didn't end racism, and the modern women's movement, now 40, 50 years old, didn't create pay parity. So it's going to be a long time before we really achieve this goal of recognizing our only growing natural resource, and that's older adults.
Thank you very much for just that rich content. Paul, I'm just led to ask you, so what do you think is an important strategies in addressing ageism and responding to ageism?
Well, I think it's a couple things. I think frankly, we need to stand up for ourselves. We need to make the point that we are still in the game, that we're not prepared to be sidelined, that we can still make meaningful contributions in business environments, in public policy, in volunteer environments, and very much in our families and communities. We need to call out negative age stereotypes and confront them, and we need to speak with our voices, and we need to speak with our dollars. And we need to learn from the success of other movements and watch what has worked and what hasn't, and apply those same learnings to our battle against ageism. We need to talk about it. Ray, you and I both sit on the Encore.org board. One of our fellow board members, Ellen Goodman, started something called the Conversation Project, which is a wonderful organization that I would commend any of your viewers to take a look at. That is encouraging conversations about death, to encourage families to prepare, to create toolkits that enable people to have conversations. And I think we should have the same thing about aging. One of my center's financial supporters once said to me, and I just thought that this was the most wonderful observation, because changing hearts and minds often starts with kids. We can affect the attitudes and ideas and behaviors of older adults, but there's something special about beginning with children who are open and fresh and prepared to accept new ideas and change. And he said, when you meet a little kid, one of your friend's kids, and you kind of get down on their level to have a conversation with them, and you You ask them what they like, whether they like sports or whether they like games or whatever interests them. And then oftentimes an adult will say to that child, and Ray, I'm going to make you finish my sentence. What do you want to do when you
grow up?
And he said, it's the wrong question. He said, we have to adopt a new question. He said, the question should be, what do you want to do when you get old? And I just thought, what a phenomenal framing, to have children think about the possibilities of their later lives, the notion that maybe their later years will be the most important, most contributing, richest years of their life, the years in which they really appreciate life more than any other time. So, we need children's books that deal with it, and we need to start these conversations in institutions across society. You are an esteemed retired pastor, and one of the places I always encourage conversation is in faith institutions, where I think there's openness to ideas and deep conversation and self-reflection. So, I think we all have a responsibility, and we have to step up to it.
So I absolutely love, and I'm going to Paul, I'm going to use you as a proxy because I did not get the privilege of hearing the author of the comment about what are you going to be when you grow old. So I'm going to attribute that to our conversation, but it's definitely something that I am going to lift up as broadly as I can. But just a note, as you are probably aware, one of the things that we've done at Metromorphosis is we provided strategic support to lifting up what we call urban elders. And these are wise and accomplished people who all happen to be over the age of 60, but are amazingly viable, sharp, just wonderful people that the community and organizations can benefit from bringing their wisdom to bear. And so we are going into the second year of that, and it's proving to be a really interesting framework for capitalizing on some part of that population.
And one of the things, by the way, Ray, that you've done personally, that I think sets an example for all of us. You've done it at Metromorphosis, and I know you've spoken a lot about it. Is supporting and elevating young people, serving as a mentor and a coach, as our friend Mark Friedman often says, not trying to be young, but to be there for those who are. And so our roles and our ideas have to shift. Again, I know you've done it in leadership at Metromorphosis, and I think more of us have to do it, to recognize the benefit that we can provide younger people without standing in their way, to stand and support them. So we should plan to work on that front.
We're having some conversations at Metromorphosis about what it looks like to move over, not out.
Exactly.
Yeah, more to come. So when you look into the future, Paul, short term, long, medium term, what do you see is potentially the other major shifts in this space that are on the horizon?
Well, look, I think that this notion of tackling ageism is incredibly important, and something that we all have to focus on, and we have to move forward and concentrate on. I'm optimistic about the prospects for healthier longevity. We need to invest more in prevention and wellness. And I think one of the things that, there are very few good things that come out of a pandemic, but I think maybe one of the things that has come out of this pandemic is a recognition of the impacts of prevention and wellness, of public health, on the risks of disease, the risks in this case of infectious disease. What we know is that if we had kept our population healthier, we know the percentage of older people who are affected negatively by COVID. If we had simply been able to assist them in staying healthier during their lives, avoiding obesity,
Yes.
reducing hypertension, et cetera. We could have saved, Ray, thousands and thousands of lives in America. And that's an equity question, it's a disparities question, and it's also a call to action for public health.
But Paul, that leads to the second to the last thing that I wanted to explore with you, and it is when you and I had our first conversations about this whole aging and longevity and productivity space. One of the things that you brought up in that conversation, and I'll never forget, was the reality of disparities that manifest or that are present. I remarked once to someone that, many of the same disparities and challenges that I faced when I was born don't go away just because I age. Share with me your thought, your framing around the reality of disparities in aging.
Look, I think it's to call it anything other than an outrage, I think would be to understate the problem. Across America, in cities across America, I have to say, Ray, I don't know the specific data for Baton Rouge, for example, but I know where I live in Los Angeles and Chicago, New York, Washington, Boston, and other places, people live 20 years difference on average, zip code to zip code. That's a product of a lot of things. It's a product of infant mortality rates, violence in youth, ongoing issues with both chronic disease and infectious disease, but it's also just a reality that people live shorter lives. And we spend a lot of time, not enough time on solutions, but a lot of time in our society talking about income inequality. But frankly, there's nothing as outrageous as equality in time. You and I both know, and particularly when you get to our stage in life, the most valuable thing you have is time with your family, time to do good work. Time for joy and time for happiness, and it's outrageous, and we know what we can do about it. In the public health world, we talk about this as social determinants of health. So it's inequality not just in financial resources, but in health access and opportunity, in safety, in nutrition, in education, a whole series of other things. We can and must tackle this. The fact that we don't in the richest country of the world is just, from my perspective, an unacceptable state of affairs. And I just don't know how we can look ourselves collectively in the mirror in America and accept conditions in which our fellow citizens, our fellow residents, live in such different circumstances. We often talk about different health outcomes when we discuss health systems in the United States, and at the top, our results are just as good as they are in Switzerland or Norway or Singapore or any place else. But at the bottom, they're in the same place as Liberia and Niger. And that's crazy. It's just crazy. And again, if COVID didn't wake us up to the reality of these disparities and the human cost, then I don't know what will. So we need recognition of the problem of longevity inequality, which is the way I describe it. We need activism to address the inequities in our communities, and we need to understand that investment in the health and welfare of people across our society is not just the nice thing to do or a good thing to do. It has a dramatic effect and will have a dramatic effect on the economic vitality of America in the future. We talk about America's competitiveness. If we seriously want to be able to compete in the future, we have to narrow those disparities. If we don't bring everyone along, we will end up a second-rate country. And so this is, for people who believe in this, like I suspect you and I both do, out of the goodness of our hearts, terrific. But for people who don't believe in it, who somehow believe that we should all be bravely independent, that we don't have collective responsibility, that we don't subscribe to the notion of social investment, I would make the case that that this is just as important for competitiveness, economic success, the flourishing of a future America as it is for doing good. The success of countries, more than anything else, in my view, is dictated by the quality and performance of its human capital. And human capital requires investment in education and investment in public health, very simply. And without that, countries' success diminishes and those countries wane.
Yeah, I was listening to you talk about the elements of this unbelievably important conversation, and I could not help but cringe for a moment to take that important conversation and juxtapose it to the some of the insanity that's permeated some of the most important places for important conversations in our country.
Yeah, well, it also reflects a confusing and really disturbing lack of belief in the possibility of government, because at the end of the day, business can do a lot and should do a lot. Our social institutions, right, faith institutions, lots of others, nonprofits, et cetera, can do a lot, but change at scale requires some level of broad-based national commitment. And again, I often say we need to have a conversation in America. You and I are having a conversation about aging, but I think we need to have a conversation in America about what we believe. Do we believe that we have some level of responsibility to each other? In Los Angeles, every day, or at least oftentimes, I'll be out on the street, and I'll see a homeless tent with a Rolls Royce driving by, and I don't begrudge the owner of the Rolls Royce their success. I mean, maybe they worked hard for it. I would assume they were also lucky, because I think luck plays a significant part in it. Maybe they were positioned for it because of their race and gender. But do they believe that homeless person living in that tent on the sidewalk in Los Angeles deserves a life of dignity and safety? People talk a lot about meritocracy, but meritocracy can go to extremes, and I think it's gone to extremes in our society today.
Yeah, I think lots of things have unfortunately gone to extremes.
Yeah.
So with our final moments together, I have just exercised the privilege of being the host of this moment. I've waved my magic wand. You are now the voice in this whole longevity conversation. What's the one thing that you would say to people who really care about this area of our being?
I would say to everyone that growing old is part of our lives. It's the thing that we all have in common if we're lucky. I mean, interestingly, again, kind of back to the point about America, we don't share race and gender and political belief and religion and lots of other things. It's one of the things that makes America an exceptional place. But one thing we do share in common is our own aging, and oftentimes the aging of members of our family who need care. So rather than turning away from people who are old, rather than turning away from our own aging, embrace the reality that this is our future and the future of our parents, and ultimately the future of our kids. And let's make aging a wonderful time of life, a time of dignity, of contribution, of engagement with young people, of a role in our society. Let's ask each other how we can use our years of experience to leave the world a better place than we found it. Let's not turn away from young people and stereotype them any more than we want them to stereotype us. and let's ensure that our policies and practices, both public and private, support the possibilities of successful and healthy and meaningful aging for everyone in our society. I know it's a big ask, but Ray, since you empowered me, I'm going to take advantage of it.
Paul, dear friend, you have given me a wonderful gift as I celebrate my 66th birthday, and it's the time to have a conversation with you. Thank you for making yourself available, and just thank you for the wonderful conversation and the really, really meaningful insights into this important world.
Thank you, Ray, and thanks for all the good work you're doing. It's noticed and appreciated, and all of us in the field and outside of the field are thrilled that you're part of it, and know that you're going to continue to make remarkable contributions. So keep up the great work.
Thank you, my friend. And here's to a world from our past where we actually got to talk to one another without a screen being the vehicle for doing it.
Look forward to seeing you in Baton Rouge soon.
Thank you, my friend.
Peace.